Last month, obviously, there's a ton of news coming out of the Google Marketing Next event. And before we kind of dive into some of the specifics, I was wondering if you could just talk about some of the general themes that you've been thinking about over this past year that then kind of got realized with a lot of the announcements at the event.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think the real key trend is in having just the consumer demands and consumer expectations have gone up so much over the course of the past few years, along with the rise of mobile and the multi-device consumer. You know, consumers really want more assistive experiences. They want better ads. They want more from marketers. With mobile devices, sessions are compressing, and so you have to be able to give folks instantaneous access to information. The way that this trend has sort of manifested itself in terms of launches are in three key areas. The first one is in audience. Audience is more important than ever. First we had remarketing lists for search ads, then we have customer match, similar audiences, and this year we announced in market. The second area is in making mobile sites better. And perhaps the biggest launch in that area was AMP. And so we have a beta now that you can sign up for accelerated mobile pages for your search ads landing pages, which is really exciting. And the third area is in measurement and attribution, both attribution across channels as well as offline measurement. And we had announcements in both of those areas.
Yeah, so I do want to dive in on the attribution product. So there are a bunch of integrations now. So there's attribution, the free version, Optimize, Surveys 360. I want to touch on each of those, but I really want to make sure that we talk about attribution because I think it's a big deal.
Sure.
And so can you talk about, first of all, how it's different from what's already available in AdWords and analytics, and kind of what the problems that you're trying to solve with this new product?
Yeah, absolutely. So well, let's start off with, Optimize is really cool. What Optimize will allow you to do is A/B landing page testing without having to worry about URL params or destination URLs, so it's really nice. The announcement that we made related to our surveys product allows you to push out surveys to users who are using remarketing, so you can ask folks questions who are on your remarketing list, which is great.
And that's the paid version. That's a paid Google. That's the Surveys 360.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's the paid version. Yeah. And then with attribution, so just taking a step back. Attribution is really, really important, and especially important with the rise of mobile, right? And so, because you could be in a last-click world, but it may potentially be overweighting, say, desktop search relative to other channels. And so, what advertisers really should do is they should take a step back and say, okay, where's the value coming from in my marketing spend across all channels, and determine how this affects my business. So we wanted to be able to do that at significant scale with significant automation and machine learning, and make it available for as many advertisers as possible for free. And that's what Google Attribution will do. And so it spans across all Google media, across AdWords and DoubleClick. And what we'll try to do is help you find the attribution model that works best for you, and then report on it in AdWords or DoubleClick. And so it's a really nice system. The other thing that we do is, if you have enough data, we can offer data-driven attribution, where we figure out the best attribution model for you just by looking at your conversion data. And so that's really, really powerful as well. So I hear from talking to advertisers that 2017 is really the year to go away from last click and to start looking at different attribution models and how it affects your business. And we want to be able to support that with a superior product and make it available to everybody.
And it's different from what's in AdWords because it's multi-channel.
That's correct.
And so, but can you talk a little bit more how that data, multi-channel data, how should advertisers be thinking about that for their bidding, and how does that all funnel back into AdWords differently than if you're setting up your bid strategies using attribution data from the new product versus the AdWords?
We just have more. You just have more data. You have more inputs from more channels, and so you should. All those data should be able to. All those data should be able to influence your bids, your search ads bids, and your display bids. So it should all feed together, and you'll bid based on the input from the attribution model. And if you're using data-driven attribution, we'll just figure it out automatically.
Yeah, and so the idea really, or one of the big ideas, is that it will let you see more upper funnel,
that's correct.
Mid funnel,
that's correct.
Adjust your bids for, say, giving credit for display that you might have missed.
That's correct.
Or non-brand that you might have thought wasn't performing.
That's correct. Exactly. And across devices, across all Google Media in a single solution.
And like in AdWords, so the conversion model gets set at the conversion action level. Right?
Yes.
So, okay. So you're not saying everything I'm touching is going to be, time decay, but you could set everything to.
That's. I mean, you can set it. If you wanted to, you could set it yourself. However, what we recommend for folks who have the data is to use data-driven attribution, so we find what the optimal model is for you as an advertiser. And even if you're not using DDA, we'll try to help you come up with the attribution model that makes the most sense for your business.
And so on data-driven attribution, I think when that announcement came out, there may have been a little confusion. The people thought to be able to use attribution, they had to have enough data to be using data-driven attribution. They're separate pieces.
They're separate, yes.
There's a model. So what are the kind of data thresholds to be able to use data-driven attribution?
I don't have exact numbers. But I can get back to you with that.
Okay.
I mean,
and it shows up once you have enough data, it just automatically shows up in the account.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. And we've kind of been talking about this, but obviously machine learning and automation has been a major theme, and that's just kind of accelerating. I mean, we've been talking about machine learning for a while. But now it's everything that we talk about. There's a machine learning in the background.
Yes.
Right? So some of the examples, I guess, close variance and exact match.
Sure.
Smart display campaigns.
Sure.
Which basically are kind of set it and forget it.
Yep.
And those ads by AdWords. What's going on with those?
We do, so we use machine learning all over the place.
Yeah.
So everything from our CTR prediction systems, our automated bidding, our automated targeting product, all of those use machine learning. We use machine learning in broad match and close match. It's really pervasively used throughout the system. In general, what we want to do is we want to use machine learning in order to make advertisers' jobs easier, so that you can focus on more. So that you can get out of the drudgery of doing things like manually setting bids or things like this, and you can focus on more strategic efforts, like, for example, thinking about your audiences, thinking about customer lifetime value, thinking about your creative and how to give the right message to the right user at the right time. And so we're going to continue pushing on these efforts, but we still think that there are enough higher value, more strategic activities that there will be plenty to do. It's just that it's not going to be the mechanics of manually setting bids for potentially millions of items. Instead, it's going to be saying, okay, what's the message that's most effective? What are the highest value customer segments? How do we support new product lines? How do we support new product initiatives? How do we make the website more effective and higher converting, or other things of this nature? These are things that we can't very easily automate through machine learning.
Right. I mean, there's two tensions that come up with talking about machine learning. One is, am I going to have a job? And what is it going to look like if I do? And two is, am I going to have control? Can I trust these machines, right? And so I guess if you talk a little bit about how people should be thinking about, you talked a little bit about thinking more strategically, but as people are thinking about their jobs a year to 5 years out, what kind of skills do you think that all of us in the room should be cultivating? And then from that control balance, how should we be thinking about letting the reins go a little bit, or all of it? How does that balance work?
I mean, so from a job perspective, it's a lot of things that I was talking about. How can you really justify your marketing expenditures? How can you determine what's the most effective spend per channel? How can you find the right audiences with the right creative? And how can you move from a model of transactional value to overall customer lifetime value, and then proactively cultivate the best customers so that they get better, or shift people from being poor customers to good customers to great customers, or things like that, and pushing them along the line. Those are still like super important skills. And a lot of companies really have not been able to get to that point because they're so caught up in the mechanics of doing online advertising at scale. In terms of trust and control or other things of this nature, we try to have controls when possible. We appropriate controls when possible. We try to have very transparent reporting, but not everything can be reported on. A great example of this is if you're moving from, say, a logistic regression model where you have a number of different features that you can very carefully point to, versus moving to deep neural nets where you really have to have more faith you have to have faith in the input, faith in the outputs, but you can't really explain what's going on because that's sort of the nature of using deep neural nets. You have to be confident that the outputs, i.e. the results, are okay, because you can't necessarily explain every single thing that's going on in the middle. And so, I think that this is not just for search advertising, but this is going to be pervasive in industry. We're going to have to get comfortable with looking at inputs and looking at outputs, and not necessarily being able to understand every step that's going on under the covers.
Yeah, I think for search, for those of us who've been in it for any number of years before the machines started taking over, it was so, you could control everything down to the nitty-gritty. And so I think it's a big adjustment for search marketers. And I think in a way that is less of an adjustment in other industries or other aspects of the business.
It's totally true. But there's really this tension, though, right? Because we have advertisers who have hundreds of millions of keywords, and right. and they're operating at that scale. And you can't do manual bidding with hundreds of millions of keywords. You have to have automation in order to be able to support the complexity that a lot of advertisers are dealing with. Also, the other thing that we find is that even though there are controls, if we can do this right, we can arrive at better outcomes. So, the recent close variance launch, on average, the average advertiser wasn't doing this right. They weren't getting all the variance, they weren't getting all the value. So we were able to offer them several percent, I believe it was 3% more conversions at similar ROI, and reduce their campaign complexity at the same time. And so, if you take a look at an advancement like that, and we also, we took a look at lots of negative cases, and still to this date, we haven't had anybody file a complaint that was related to that change. They may have had concerns with the previous launch that we did that and those problems have since been fixed, but we still haven't seen any complaints related to this, and it delivers more advertiser value. And so, we have to make those kinds of changes because it's good for everyone. It's good for the users who are getting better ads for their queries. It's good for the advertisers because they're getting better results with less effort, and it's good for Google as well. So
more search data is now being able to be tapped for targeting.
Yep. And
so the in-market audiences are going to be available for search targeting, don't remember when. This fall, or
I don't have the exact date for in-market, but
it's coming.
I'm pretty sure it's this fall.
Yeah. So why why the change now to be able to tap all this search data, and kind of what's next for audience targeting in search?
Well, I mean, I think that let's start off with why now and all this. So we've had this logical progression where we started with remarketing a list for search ads, and then we went to customer match, and then we went to similar audiences, and now we're doing in market. And the reason why is because audience works for search. When advertisers come to us and they talk about the most significant and impactful features that we've released over the course of the past several years, audience often comes up because it's really important. It allows you to bid differentially on different audiences, and it allows you to have different creatives for different audiences increasingly. I know that was difficult to do before, but now it's easier. And so, I think that in market is just the next launch in a logical progression. At the same time, from a consumer perspective, consumers have less time than ever. They have higher expectations than ever. They want the right ad with the right message at the right time, and audience features allow you to do that. In terms of what's next, I mean, I think we have a lot of runway with the current areas that we have. We have a few other things that we're cooking up that I can't necessarily talk about. But if you take a look at these areas, we've got our first number of in-market segments, right?
Yep.
We can do more of those. When it comes to similar audiences, we've got our V1 of similar audiences. There's a lot more that we can bring to bear in terms of data in order to make similar audiences better and more effective and more flexible and more configurable and things like that. And so there's going to be a lot of focus on growing those features, certainly over the course of the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay. And you touched on AMP.
Yes.
I want to talk more about AMP from the beta that's going on, that was just announced,
yes,
where you can point your mobile ads to an AMP-enabled page,
yes,
landing page. And then also what was announced is that display ads will just automatically be served up
will be amplified
in AMP pages.
Yeah.
So how should advertisers be thinking about mobile content in terms of AMP versus responsive? And should everyone in this room go back to their office and say, we got to get AMP? Or should they say, we're good, we're going to let these other folks, because there are a lot of challenges, obviously, with implementing AMP and some of the tracking issues and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. First and foremost, advertisers should have great mobile sites. If you don't have a great mobile site, work on that first. But after you're done with having a great mobile site, the question is, how long does it take for your pages to load? What does your bounce rate look like? What does your conversion rate look like? And things like that. And so, there have been a number of third-party studies. A couple of them, one suggests that 50% of people abandon after 3 seconds load time, which is, I think, probably a little aggressive. Another one suggests that you get a 20% conversion rate drop for every incremental second of page load. It really pays to be fast. And so when a lot of advertisers have landing pages that take 10 seconds to load, we've got a solution here that delivers sub 1 second response time with AMP. So it's certainly worth paying attention to. The idea is, can you make the mobile web as responsive as apps, or more responsive than apps, while being a whole lot easier to develop and a whole lot more flexible? And that's sort of the mission of the AMP team, and we want it to work for advertisers too. In terms of your second question, which is like, hey, should advertisers be using this? How should they be thinking about it? And especially given some of the tracking concerns, we are trying to make all forms of conversion tracking work within AMP. We have some work to do on the Google Analytics side. We're currently working through that. And so expect some launches soon in the next few months in order to resolve that. But I would highly encourage folks to start experimenting with AMP with a fraction of their site to see how it does. Because with our initial pilot advertisers, these guys were seeing like 5x to 7x improvements in page load time, big increases in conversion rates, some really, really impressive stats. So it's worth, granted, it's extra work that you have to do for your landing pages, but it's certainly worth experimenting with because the results can potentially be really exciting.
And kind of related to that, so purchases on Google.
Yes.
That's where you can buy right from a PLA, from a Google-hosted landing page.
Yeah.
Does AMP kind of just solve that issue anyway, or is there still a need for this? And kind of, can you just give us an update on what's happening with purchases on Google and kind of what the roadmap is for that?
Yeah. So purchases on Google is outside of my team. I don't necessarily have a great understanding of what their roadmap looks like for the next 24 months. They don't have any new announcements to announce at this time, which is okay. Purchases on Google is basically, have folks used it at all? Or checked it out?
Yeah, we have one.
Few folks. Essentially, I actually used it this weekend. I was looking to get a running shirt, and it happened to be available on Moosejaw. And 30 seconds later, I was all checked out and completed because I had my credit card on file with Google, I had my address on file with Google, and I was authenticated in Google Chrome. And so, what Purchases on Google gives you is this very fast, consistent checkout flow that works on mobile devices. And so, literally you can go from viewing an item in the Google search results page to completing a purchase in 30 seconds or less. Like it's really fast and elegant. But it's also like purpose built for that case, for getting users who have Google login credentials and have their payment information on file with Google and making it easier for them to check out. And fortunately, there are many millions of users who are in this case, so it's worth experimenting with or worth implementing if you're an e-commerce advertiser. AMP is much more general. We don't have a lot of the specific e-commerce functionality that Purchase on Google has yet. It doesn't have the very specifically mandated flow that Purchase on Google has, so it's more of a general purpose technology. So my advice for you is, if you're an e-commerce advertiser, do both and see what works for you.
Okay. Offline to online measurement and local. So I think you've
online to offline.
Online to offline.
Yeah.
Thank you. So in-store purchases. Measurement was just announced.
Yes.
It's been in beta for a few years, and you've now.
Well, in-store purchases has not been the things that we announced have not been in beta. We had store visits. Store visits was previously announced,
yes.
And then we had another solution for store sales using third parties that's been in beta for a while.
Yeah.
The new solutions that we have are brand new.
Yes. Yeah, and so do you want to talk a little bit about the sales piece of this?
Yes.
And kind of two methods of doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have two different ways of doing it that were both announced at GMN. The first way is if you have loyalty data or other ways to get your customers' email addresses, you can upload your email addresses and purchase transactions, and we'll be able to help you match in an anonymous and privacy-sensitive way. We'll go from an ad click to a purchase transaction using email data as a means of joining, right? And so, and that works in any country worldwide. The other solution that we have is a more unique solution. And what this one does is you don't have to do any integration. The information just shows up in your account. And this works in the US only. And so what we do is we go from an ad click to a purchase in the store, again, in an anonymized and aggregated way, using only data that we have from partners who we work with financial partners who we work with, which cover 70% of all credit and debit card transactions in the United States. So very much like our store visit solution, basically, when you are enabled as an advertiser, it'll just show up in your account and you'll start to see store visits. The same thing will start happening to advertisers with store sales when we have enough data in order to be able to report on those store sales data. And the solution that we use, which saw a lot of ink in the press when we announced it, is really interesting. Basically, there's a novel cryptographic approach that we developed where we present data in an encrypted form. The partner presents data in an encrypted form. You can perform operations on it, like counting, in encrypted form, but you can never see the underlying data. So we can know that, say, there are 100 transactions on this date at this for this retailer, but we can never know what those, and we can know the aggregate volume of those transactions, but we can never get at an individual transaction. We can never get at an individual user. And we think that this unique approach is pretty impressive in that it's completely privacy safe, but allows you to do this kind of stuff at scale.
And the aggregate data you see, so you see transaction counts.
Yes.
You see total conversion or transaction dollar amount, or?
We could see total transaction dollar amounts, but we could never pull an individual.
Right, okay.
We could never pull an individual credit card number or dollar amount or transaction. We'll only get aggregate metrics for a period of time.
Okay.
Like a day.
All right. But you can see, okay, this.
You can see like, you've had 100 ad clicks and, and that's resulted in 50 conversions.
50 conversions worth $300 or?
Worth $300.
Okay. All right. Great. Because I wasn't sure if that is the transactional.
The aggregate value, yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I think what's been now like 5 billion visits.
Yeah, we measured 5 billion visits to date, yes.
And so that, again, like you said, so that data automatically just shows up in your account if you meet the data.
If you meet the thresholds,
right. Yeah. Do you see that, as the models get better and more data, do you see that drilling down and becoming available to more and more stores, being smaller and smaller stores?
Absolutely, and that's our major focus for this is to make this available to more advertisers. And as the stores get smaller and smaller, and as the transaction counts get lower and lower, we need to do additional things. So, we also want to make it available in more countries, which just involves more country expansion efforts. But then also with these smaller locations, we're doing more with, in addition to improving our algorithms, we're deploying Bluetooth beacons at large scale, for example, so that we can be sure that you're within a particular location with a higher confidence level.
Got it. I want to touch briefly on Apple's news about tracking and preventing third-party trackers in Safari, that they kind of announced their next level of doing that. And I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on how advertisers should be thinking about Safari traffic, mobile specifically, and how you're thinking about it from Google's perspective.
Well, so it's early days. We're still working through it both internally as well as with Apple. So I'll talk about what you can do today, and then talk a little bit about the implications of this. In terms of what you can do today, if you're using analytics, it's 1P tracking, and so you're in good shape. We're still trying to figure out what to do with double-click and AdWords conversion tracking users and remarketing and things like this. And so we're still working it out, but once we work it out, we'll have an official position. From an industry perspective, though, Apple has been very clear about why it wants to do this, and outlined this in a really nice developer blog post. But there are sort of unintended consequences of this.
Right.
When tracking, cookies are a mechanism that gives users a high degree of choice. There are alternatives to cookies that give users no choice, like fingerprinting. When advertisers and publishers can't use cookies, a logical thing for them to do would be to move towards fingerprinting. And you take the user control away in this approach. You can relatively easily identify a user based on certain aspects of their browser. We choose not to do this at Google because we want there to be that user choice. But when you take the user choice away, you're kind of backing folks into a corner. And so the action from Apple is putting a lot of pressure on advertisers and putting a lot of pressure on publishers who are trying to monetize within trying to run their business within a framework that works pretty well. And I think it's reasonable for advertisers to be able to track conversions. And I think it's reasonable for advertisers to be able to access their customers on different sites. And so, I think philosophically that's sort of where we stand. And we're going to try to work it out with Apple, and we're going to provide you with more information as we get official responses over time.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Last question. The AdWords Interface.
Yes.
So I think it's now available to millions more advertisers. I think that was the news.
Yeah, over 1 million, yeah.
Okay. And so I've seen it as it has evolved over the past year or so, and more features keep becoming available.
Yeah.
And they're still not everything.
Yeah.
So for people who are just coming into it, it's a different experience.
Yes.
And change is hard. And so I talk to people who say, oh my gosh, I hate it. And I said, okay, well, you got to kind of ease into it and understand that, yes, not everything's available yet. And change is hard. But what would you say to somebody who says, I can't do that, I'm going back to the old one?
Well,
how do you transition?
So just talking about it, so on average, it's 20% faster for page load times. And based on feedback we've gotten, like one example is iProspect says it takes them 30% less time to work in the new interface than it does in the old interface. We really tried to clean up workflows for common tasks. Like that was our biggest. So taking a look at this from a platform perspective, like we wanted to build a platform that on top of it we could build lots of assistive flows so we could make it easier to do the core things that you want to do within AdWords. To me, that's really, really important, that we just, for the practitioner, for somebody who's using the tool every day, that it just becomes better and more joyful and more insightful, and helps you do what you want to do, and also is a good foundation for us to build new features on top of that. And so that's very much what we've tried to build. So we've cleaned up a lot of the core workflows to make them faster and easier to use. We've improved reporting significantly, and we've also launched a few new features that are only available in the new interface, AdWords Next. So some examples of those are call bid adjustments, so you can do bid adjustments for calls, and then we also have the promotion extension, which is only available in AdWords Next. So I think there are a lot of reasons to use it, and I think that ultimately, whereas I think a few people have said they don't like the change, a lot of folks have said, hey, this is better, and we like it better, it's easier to use, it makes our jobs easier. And so overall, we've been pretty encouraged by the response, and everybody will get it by the end of the year.
Yeah, right. Everyone will have it. I will say the visualizations, particularly on the the overview dashboards, are so great. Just from an executive kind of just in and out, just getting insights that in the old interface take exports and chart building and
we want to do so much more of that. There are still lots and lots of cases where advertisers have to go digging through Excel in order to get things done, or where insights are really hard to come by, and we want to be more proactive and assistive. We want to be able to offer that to our advertisers and to our partners so that they can just have a better experience and be able to do more with less effort.
Great. Thank you. Big round of applause for Jerry. Thank you so much for joining us. This is terrific.
Thank you.